Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, the time has arrived. The full Hiyuki kit is here, and let me just say this up front before we go ahead and start diving right on into it. This kit is probably going to be one of the more complicated ones in the history of the game, and it's also going to give us answers to a couple of questions that you're probably having, especially knowing that this character is a negative status unit. Do you need Chisa? Do you need some specialized teammates? So on and so forth. We're going to be going through every single facet of this kit, both the simplified explanation as well as the detailed one, and we will be answering all of those questions along the way. So with that in mind, do understand that this is going to require quite a bit of backtracking just to take a look at like how certain resources are gathered, because her kit is a bit of a doozy, but once you figure out the core essentials of how she operates, she's not going to be nearly as complicated as she looks at first glance. So without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's get right on into this. And of course, take a look first at some of her combat roles. So you can see over here, Glacio Chafe, main damage dealer. She's going to have dual combat modes as well. And she's also going to have in combat support, I think this is kind of like focusing on certain characteristics she has. She's able to freeze enemies. Like straight up, like freeze them, CC them, all that goodness. So do keep that in mind. All right. Got a little bit of zoom going as well. And then you're going to have Hiyuki over here in all of her fully refined glory. This is one of the, I'm just going to be honest, this is one of the best face cards I think we've gotten in the history of the game. Going to be using that in a lot of thumbnails for sure. So she's going to be, obviously, with Glacio Chafe and the ability to freeze people, she's going to be a Glacio character. She's going to be using a sword. We already know all this information. And when it comes to her Ascension materials, well, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe you can farm our choice right now from the astronaut. I'm not entirely sure if you're able to farm red bells. I think you actually are able to. And when it comes to things like exoswarm cores and wing polarizers, well, that's not really going to be too difficult, is it? Right? And when it comes to the weekly boss mat over here, well, ladies and gentlemen, that looks like it's going to be Denya, because those are like the little, well, if you know, you know. That's the shit that like she wears on like her headband. So I guess Denya's going to be a new boss. So yeah, I guess red bells are probably going to be on the new map. So the main thing over here is going to be our choice, and of course, getting those wing polarizers ready to go. And when it comes to the combat roles, main damage dealer, liberation damage. You probably could have guessed that from the new set that's coming in the next update. If you didn't know that already, you're probably goofing around a little bit. Liberation damage, and of course, based off everything we've seen, Glacio Chafe 2. So now let's go ahead. Let's start off with the simplified kit overview over here. I've already taken a look at the detailed one, so I can talk a little bit about what you're seeing on the screen. This is a simple 3-hit basic attack chain. And when it comes to Hiyuki's rotation, you're kind of only going to be using this once. And you're kind of never going to be using the whole actual attack chain, because there's a part of her kit that actually advances her to the 3rd hit. And so just imagine that this is probably the least impactful part of her entire kit. You're only going to be using like part of this attack. She's also going to have, though, a special heavy attack, and that's where she's going to pull out the bow. And you're going to notice over here, to be able to use this, your dedication needs to be full. To build up dedication, you'll basically use the 3rd hit of this attack chain, and her intro skill is going to give her like a good bit of it as well. So you kind of go like intro, do the final hit over here, and then you'll use her special heavy attack where she, again, pulls out the bow and then does those shots. One thing to keep in mind is that this is actually going to consume some of your stamina as well, so I assume that if you're dodging and spamming dodges too much, you might not be able to use it, but this is done at the start of your rotation, so I hope you're not wasting your stamina like that before you get on field with her. Next, well, you're going to have the basic attacks that are available when she's in her special orb that is gotten into by using the first cast of her liberation. And so this attack chain over here, well, boy, oh boy, you've seen a lot of this one. And this is a lot more unique, especially compared to the one that we had before. You don't have the dual swords or anything like that, but as you can see, a lot of like ice sculptures and stuff being actively made. And then they're also detonating in combat as well. You're also going to be able to use this attack chain while you're in the air. So do keep that in mind. It's definitely a different animation. It's also going to end with a bit of a plunge, but definitely you got like some verticality in her kit as well, but not really something that you're probably going to be doing too often unless you're facing maybe a boss like Sigilum or something like that, and he's being a bit of an asshole. Moving forward, you're also going to have a unique heavy attacks that are available as well. And so Hiyuki has this like charge state that she can enter into over here, where she's actually able to actively block some attacks. Does a little bit of aura farming over here. You can kind of see what's going on. However, when she has a resource called White Out Bitterfrost, which is done through other attack chains that she has in her kit. Like I said before, this character is able to do a lot of different things. You get a special heavy attack that summons a gigantic ice sculpture over here, has a little bit of a cinematic, and then you can see her kind of like sheathe the blade. The sculpture explodes, and then it does a bunch of damage. You will want to be doing this at least once in all of your rotations. And, well, if you don't, you're kind of like griefing, and you'll be reducing damage on the second cast of her liberation, right? The one where she kind of, well, shatters all the different futures, all of that, breaks the glass, that sort of thing. If you're not doing this properly and you don't like build up your rotation to be able to do this attack, you're gonna run into some issues. But you might be wondering, okay, how do I get that White Out Bitterfrost? And that's where this next attack, sorry, we'll get to that one in a second. We'll get to that one in a second. Like I said before, we're gonna have to do some backtracking. So she's also gonna have her baseline resonance skills, right? And you can see over here, casting this skill enhances the next basic attack, Present Self Stage 3. That's the very first attack that we saw over here. And this one's also gonna give you some points of dedication. And remember, you need the dedication to be able to use that like bow charged heavy attack. From what I've been reading in her kit, this might be the fakest ability in the game. I don't think you're ever actually going to need to use this, because she already gets a shit ton of dedication from using her intro skill, and then like the third hit of her basic attack chain also gives you dedication too. So this is kind of just more of like an overworld thing. I think in optimized rotations, you're never going to actually use this. But do keep in mind that, well, it is going to buff the next third hit of your basic that you do. So maybe if you need like a little bit of extra damage in your rotation, you could decide to use it. But for most intents and purposes, this is kind of just cosmetic, though. I guess if you're doing solo runs like some people are talking about in chat, you'll find some uses for it over here. But yeah, essentially, when dedication is below 300 points, if you decide to use a heavy attack, you'll instead just use the third hit of her basic instead. So yeah, that's you can see over here the animation of it is a little bit long too, so maybe that's why you won't want to use it after your intro skill. Maybe if you need like the extra energy as well, your Hiyuki maybe doesn't have like 120% ER. This is something that might be able to get you over the edge too. Just some stuff to think about. She's also going to have a special skill as well when she's in her alternative form, right? The purple one. And while on the ground, she can press resonance skill to pull in nearby targets, get some grouping in there as well. And she's also going to remove the target's Frostbind. This is something that we haven't really talked about yet, but Frostbind is essentially, well, her special CC effect that she has when stacks of Glacio Chafe, or really her unique form of Glacio Chafe, Glacio Bite, are built up. So, yeah, that's something that she's going to have available too. Just something for you to think about. And now we got Frostbite Petalfall. This is just when she uses that shit in the air. So, you can see over here it shares a cooldown, but yeah, they basically have the same goddamn effect. They remove the freeze effect that you have, and then you just group them. I know I mentioned something about resonance energy before. Well, let's read a little bit more over here. So this is going to be the first cast of her liberation. And this only becomes available after using Frost Splinter Present Self. And if we go ahead, we scroll back up. Okay, you might be wondering, what is Frost Splinter Present Self? Well, that is when she does the 3 bow shots. So that's when she gains access to the first cast of her liberation, and then she transforms into the purple form. So you kind of see what I'm talking about over here. You want to do the bow attack, and then you'll have access to this transformation over here. You just deal a burst of Glacio damage. You also apply some Glacio Chafe as well, and then you'll enter the 4-claim self form, which is, again, when she turns purple. This ability over here doesn't actually require any resonance energy to cast. So some people are saying, oh, she's similar to Augusta. Well, it's a little bit like a blend of Augusta and Frolova when it comes to this, because Frolova doesn't actually require resonance energy to cast her stuff either. I'm not entirely sure if she needs resonance energy to use the second cast of her liberation. I don't think that's clarified actually in her kit. And if that's the case, she doesn't require resonance energy to use the second cast, then she might be a 0 ER unit. However, if she does, then yeah, it's going to be a little bit more like Augusta than Frolova, because Frolova requires no ER at all to do any of the abilities, or really to use any of her liberation casts. So, not entirely sure if she's a 0 ER unit yet, but like I said before, we're likely going to be seeing when she actually releases whether or not that's the case. And it doesn't really matter anyways, because you can't even pre-farm her echoes, because this shit is going to be releasing in 3.3. So yeah, just this first cast though definitely doesn't need ER. Because this is the second one. You'll hold your Resonance Liberation to enter a charging state, and you'll continuously consume stacks of this other resource called Snowforged Blade. And releasing your Liberation will then, well, deal more damage based off the number of stacks you've consumed. And this has a stack limit of 3 to actually, well, consume as a whole. And you'll notice that when you read how she gets some of these resources, she actually has like rotations where like the first one can actually deal less damage and then the second one can deal way more. Or you can sort of manage your stack consumption so that both of them are dealing, you know, rather equal amounts of damage each. So it truly does depend on like what type of enemy you're facing. Obviously, right, if the boss has like no HP left when you decide to use your ability, or you're in Whimpering Waves, for example, you maybe don't want to consume as many stacks as possible just because you're going to end up in the situation where you're like overkilling enemies. So it's pretty cool that she has that ability like built in to like control how much resources she's actually using to, you know, either really push for damage or make sure you're not doing too much damage. You can see over here how, well, multi-layered of a unit she already is, and depending on the game mode you're in, Whimpering Waste or DPM or, you know, Tower of Adversity, what you might want to do in specific circumstances, and that whole charging mechanic over here is going to be how you make the decisions here. So that is pretty good. I'm already thinking she's going to be a pretty solid overall Whimpering Waste unit, but you probably should have guessed that already by looking at the massive AoE that she has on so many of her attacks, aside from like that charged bow shot, because she also has like that grouping built in on her Resonance skill. Remember that, ladies and gentlemen, that shit is there as well. Now we've got her Forte circuit, and this is where the special stacks come from. Right? Because you also want that white out Bitter Frost, which you can use to build up the resources to get to that special heavy attack. And this is called EI. I think it's called that. It's a little bit questionable to pronounce. So basically, while in EI stance, press the normal attack to cast basic attack Yai, dealing glacial damage and blocking incoming attacks. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, she's kind of like able to do that. If Hiyuki has Frost Harden Yai, consume 1 stack of it to enhance this attack and gain 1 point of white out Bitter Frost. And remember, right, you need the 3 points of white out Bitter Frost to use that special heavy attack over here, where she has like the cinematic animation. And then, of course, creates that giant ice sculpture and blows it up. This also, using this attack, also grants her a stack of Snowforged Blade. So you're noticing, right, how her kit is starting to work out. You want to enter into this enhanced state over here by using the first cast of her Liberation. Then you want to use a bunch of those Yai attacks that are enhanced with like the Frost Harden thing. And then you'll be able to build up the 3 stacks of the, You're probably noticing how I'm already getting my tongue tied up. You're going to build up the 3 stacks of Whiteout Bitter Frost, and then you're going to use that special heavy attack to then get a stack of Snowforged Blade, and then be able to buff the second cast of your Liberation. That was actually relatively easy to follow, but it still sounded a bit confusing. That's because she has a lot of fucking resources in her kit, a lot of different things you need to build up, but you kind of do build them up in order, and it's not nearly as complicated in practice that it sounds on paper. Because, like I mentioned before, we gotta like kind of scroll up and down, and Kuro could have done a way better job of telling you what abilities generate what in here. Now, she's also going to have a special replacement for Glacio Chafe, which is like a little bit odd because she's the first Glacio Chafe unit. While Hiyuki is in the team, Glacio Chafe inflicted by all Resonators is replaced by Glacio Bite. And when foreclaiming Inward Vision or basic attack Yai hit the target, if the target has no fewer than 10 stacks of Glacio Bite, remove 10 stacks and trigger Frostbind once. There are a lot of typos in this kit. I'm pretty sure this is not now fewer, this is no fewer. So essentially, if she has 10 stacks of Glacio Bite on an enemy using a Yai attack, or of course using the transformation attack on her Liberation, that's going to basically CC them and, well, trigger a freeze. And as you can see over here, she's going to be basically the first character in the game that's able to really freeform freeze enemies. I know Carlotta can do it, but Carlotta can only freeze them for like 1.5 seconds, and it's on like a pretty long cooldown on her skill. But she's arguably not like the first unit in the game that CCs enemies, but CCing them on like this many different types of attacks and also being able to freeze in an AoE too, I don't really think that's something that a lot of other characters have. So that's where some of her supportive ability comes in, and naturally, right, if the enemy's frozen, then they can't deal damage to you. And we all know how helpful that is, especially when you're playing units like Carlotta. Now, intro skill. And this is where you're going to see a lot of like the rotation come together. So she's going to deal glacial damage that's considered resonance liberation damage. And this is kind of like the realization over here. A lot of abilities in Hiyuki's kit deal resonance liberation damage. And so she's basically almost guaranteed to immediately trigger the first part of the snowfall effect, where when you deal liberation damage, you remove snowfall, which is gotten from inflicting glacial chafe. And then from here, you increase your crit rate. There are some people that are going to take a look at the outro skill that I'm about to show you and be like, look, say, you were wrong. Hiyuki's actually a sub DPS. You'll see what's going on soon. So, yeah, she inflicts 1 stack of Glacial Chafe on this ability as well, but then kind of like immediately consumes Snowfall because she deals liberation damage. And then so you get like the crit rate buff really early on in her rotation. Also, in Present Self, which is her baseline form, casting this skill restores 200 points of dedication. And pressing or holding the normal attack within a certain time period after using the skill will get you into the 3rd stage of her basic, which gives you the other 100 points of dedication you need to use her special heavy attack. So it's kind of just you intro skill in and then you basic attack a single time, and like your dedication part of your Forte circuit should be filled. That basically means you spend like half a second in her baseline form and then you immediately use her first cast of her liberation. Yeah, she basically has like light speed access to her enhanced state, but that also means that you're pretty much never going to be in you're pretty much never going to be in like this red form that you see over here. So yeah, I hope you like the color purple and I hope you like white, because that's mainly what you're going to be seeing when you play this character. So you can see over here, that's where like the shortening is. You can also use her intro skill while you're in her foreclaim self state. But as you can see over here, this almost doesn't do anything because it just advances her to the 2nd stage of her basic. You're almost never going to do this, so I'm not going to talk about it that much. I do wonder what kind of weird shit you're going to end up doing to somehow intro skill in her 2nd form, but I don't know. I guess you could get creative with it. Just know it's not going to be optimal. So I don't know what to talk about here. Anyways, moving on. Her outro skill is very unique, and it almost kind of doesn't make that much sense. Glacial damage dealt by nearby resonators other than Hiyuki in the team is amplified by 20% against targets affected by Glacial Chafe for 20 seconds. You can kind of see what's going on over here. For some godforsaken reason, they decided to show Carlotta. Yeah, this doesn't really make much sense because the target needs to be affected by Glacial Chafe. And Carlotta doesn't inflict that debuff, so it's like this outro skill would almost like not exist. And this outro skill can't really exist with the Wishes of Quiet Snowfall, the 2nd effect, right? Where it says casting the outro skill removes Snowfall and grants glacial damage bonus to the incoming resonator. When Snowfall is removed, only one of the effects above can be triggered. Hiyuki removes Snowfall almost immediately in her fucking rotation because almost all of her attacks deal resonance liberation damage. And so there's no way to even trigger the 2nd half of this effect. Pretty much no goddamn way at all, because how are you going to get the Concerto to do that? How are you going to get the Concerto to do that without using any of Hiyuki's abilities? You can kind of see what's going on over here. So that's one of the odd things about the demonstration they decided to show. This is clearly designed for having another teammate that, well, does glacial damage and inflicts glacial chafe at the same time, but that teammate does not exist yet, which is a little bit unfortunate, but that's just kind of the reality. Hiyuki's outro skill is kind of exclusively made for an unreleased unit that is not out there yet. But in the same vein, it's not like this outro skill is like that strong anyways. 20% amp is tiny. Let's just be real here, especially when you have so many other sources of way bigger amplification in the team. And when it's a sub DPS that's going to be benefiting from this, yeah, that's not that much damage, bro. I'm just going to be real with you. It's not really that much at all. Anyways, that is the rough breakdown of her kit. And you're probably wondering, oh, say you missed like a ton of shit. How does she even use the Yai form? What resources does it consume? Blah, 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 all of that. Like I said, this is the simplified version, and we'll have a more detailed breakdown coming up very soon. That's gonna hopefully shed some more light about how this character's kit actually works. Now, first things first, let's take a look at the combat guide. Deals substantial resonance liberation damage. When certain attacks hit enemies, consume glacial... This is the most dog shit thing I think I've ever fucking seen. Bro, it's like they straight... Why even make it at this point? Why even spend the time putting this section in, formatting it, and doing all of this when you're missing, like, 99% of her kit in the breakdown? Bro, this has to be, I think, the worst one Kuro's ever made. They're actually just trolling. It doesn't even get... It's not even like a summary. It's just, like, straight up glossing over, like, her entire fucking kit. So, let's skip that for now. We'll get back to her actual combat guide later. This is where we're going to answer the question over here. Her inherent skills are going to tell you about whether or not she needs Chisa. When a Resonator in the team applies Glacio Chafe or Havoc Bane effect, Hiyuki gains 1 stack of Snow Rust, and Snow Rust stacks up to 3 times. Each Resonator can only trigger this effect once. Hiyuki can give herself a stack of Snow Rust. There's only one other character in the game that can give her stack number 2, and that one is Chisa. So let's see what the stacks do. The first stack gives this bonus. When Hiyuki is the active Resonator in the team, Glacial Bite damage is amplified by 30% against targets within a certain range, and Hiyuki's crit damage is increased by 40%. So that's just straight up what her inherent is going to give Hiyuki just by herself. And now this is the second one. When Hiyuki is the active Resonator in the team, each time she applies Glacio Chafe, she additionally deals 102% Glacio Bite damage once. And then with 3 stacks, which is not possible, when Hiyuki is the active Resonator in the team, Glacio Bite damage is additionally amplified by 30% against targets within a certain range. You're probably seeing what's going on over here. These buffs, aside from the first one, right, are essentially entirely based on increasing the amount of negative status damage that is happening in the team. And you're probably beginning to see over here, well, Hiyuki, when it comes to at least like the personal part of like her stats, she is the only one that needs to be in here to gain the crit damage buff. And to get more of like the negative status interaction, you're going to need characters like Chisa and of course the third unreleased unit. And so to answer the question of, well, does she need Chisa? My initial glance is maybe not. Potentially not. And the reason for that is very, very, very simple. You're probably going to want to see what your Hiyuki's performance looks like with, well, one other team comp in the game. And that's naturally going to be involving Lene as well as Mornier. Because this is very simple. Lene is clearly going to be one of the best possible sub DPSs, at least on Hiyuki's release, based off the fact that Lene has this outro skill over here, which effectively will give Hiyuki 40% resonance liberation amplification, which is, well, when you consider that resonance liberation damage, right, is the main damage type of Hiyuki, then you're not really leaning fully into the Glacio Chafe part of the archetype for her to deal damage in the first place. Then you combine that with the fact that Mornier over here, right, has that nice, that very, very, very nice damage buff, up to 40% additional damage dealt to the enemy when Toon Rupture or Toon Strain is on them, and you'll be running Lene on Toon Rupture in this team. Well, Lene and Mornier should also be a pretty solid showing, at least on Hiyuki's release. However, do think about it this way. Chisa also has this very, very, very strong outro over here, where she goes ahead and increases the stack limit of negative statuses in the team. And I am pretty sure that this whole Glacial Bite damage, all of that, is going to feel a lot higher with Chisa available. And so you can think about it this way. If you're looking to fully capitalize on the negative status parts of Hiyuki's kit, and of course, the constant damage that she's going to be doing, and of course, when stack number 3 is available, the 30% additional amp, do realize that there's already going to be 30% amp over here on stack number 1. And then when you combine that with the effect of Hiyuki's weapon, right, we've gotten a little bit of a preview. Well, Hiyuki's weapon gives 20% amp as well. But this isn't nearly as much as stack number 1 or stack number 3. But you're probably beginning to notice, right? Hiyuki's signature doesn't really interact that well with Lene and Mornier. And you're kind of seeing where like the upward ceiling of this unit is actually coming from. If you want the strongest Hiyuki possible, and you want a Hiyuki, right, that's fully leveraging the abilities from her signature weapon and stuff like that, you're going to want Chisa. And even if you go ahead and pull Hiyuki's signature, then well, not having Chisa is going to cause you to miss out on this repeated 102% glacial bite damage that's occurring. And then this glacial bite damage is going to benefit from this 30% amp, this one on stack number 3, and of course, the 20% amp that you're getting from her signature. So by not having Chisa, you're actually losing quite a bit of value from Hiyuki's signature. So it's kind of like if you want this character to reach their maximum potential, you will want Chisa. And if you don't have Chisa, that's just not going to be able to happen. And of course, on top of having Chisa, you're also going to want the third member of this team, somebody that's a sub DPS that inflicts Glacial Chafe as a Glacial character, and of course, is also going to be able to utilize, well, none other than this bad boy over here. Where is it at, though? This Wish is a Quiet Snowfall set, and they're going to be more so using the second part, right, where the outro skill is going to remove Snowfall and grant a glacial damage bonus to the incoming Resonator. So yeah, not having Chisa, I think, isn't going to be that big of an issue on Hiyuki's release, as long as you have Lene and Mornier. But as you get, you know, more and more additions to the game, and as you get, you know, more and more of the pieces of the Glacial Chafe team, Chisa's going to be a core component of it, because naturally, right, applying Havoc Bait or Glacial Chafe is a way to get that stack, and it's kind of obvious why Havoc Bait is so focused on over here. It's because that's Chisa's debuff. So yeah, that's something to think about, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think it's mandatory on release, and she's definitely way better than Zani, because Zani did not really have other teammates, and I don't think Hiyuki's damage is going to fall off of a cliff from not having Chisa on your team. I'm thinking that Hiyuki is going to be doing just fine with the Lene and Mornier, but you're simply not going to be able to reach her full damage potential. But it's not like you're going to lose attacks in your kit. It's not like there's going to be like a forced need to like quick swap. You're mainly just missing some additional negative status damage, but you'll still have full access to Hiyuki's kit. And when it comes to like the Zani situation as well, think about it this way, ladies and gentlemen. This interaction over here was bad for not just due to the fact that Zani felt like complete shit without having Phoebe. It was bad because Confession Phoebe only has one team. If you have Absolution Phoebe, it's pointless to even own Zani in the first place, because then they're both Spectro heavy attack DPSs. And so you would kind of pull Confession Phoebe just to work on this one team, and that's kind of like it. That's the ceiling of the character. Chisa, on the other hand, is going to have 3 teams in 3.3. She's going to have the Fusion Burst team with Imeth and Denya. She's obviously going to have the Cardathea and Chikona team that she's had since release. And then, of course, she's also going to have the Glacial Bite Chafe team with Hiyuki. So it's like needing Chisa is way less of like a problem, because you don't actually need her, because you could just use Lene Mornier. And then similarly, you have 2 other pretty high caliber teams that you can use Chisa in. And it's not anything like the restrictions you would have with Confession Mode Phoebe, where that bitch is used in one team and then nowhere else. It's like a dead end for your account. So that's something to keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Not nearly as much of a sacrifice is being made over here. And so the comparisons that some people are trying to make to like Zani, saying this sounds like a Zani situation, that kind of just means you have no fucking clue what you're talking about at all, because the situations aren't even close. They aren't even close to similar. Let's be real here. It's like night and fucking day. It's Zani mains being jealous. Yeah, they kind of just want somebody else to like... Zani mains are kind of like pigs in mud. They're like, they really want somebody else to like join them for company. But no, I'm sorry, your character is just, your character is a dead end investment wise. It is what it is. Stop trying to make every other unit in the game seem as bad. Grow up, guys. Come on. It's been a year. It's been a year. Just accept it. Now, that is the Chisa question. That is the negative status question. Blah, blah, blah. We've answered it. Now let's move on to some of the resources. Specifically, Snowforge Blade, which remember, that shit is consumed to make her second Liberation cast deal more damage. Ephemeral Realm is going to be her second inherent skill. And once Hiyuki leaves the combat state or recovers after being knocked out, when she stays out of combat for 4 seconds with fewer than 1 point of Snowforge Blade, basically with 0 points of Snowforge Blade, restore 1 point. Remember that there's a stack limit of 3 on Snowforge Blade, and you can choose how many stacks of it you want to consume. Typically, each rotation, you're going to consume you're going to generate 1 stack of Snowforge Blade. So after your first rotation, you should have 2. You can choose 2, well, use both of them and get like a 2 out of 3 charged second Liberation cast, or you could decide to save it, consume no Snowforge Blade, and then on your second rotation, you've got 3 stacks ready to go, and you can do like some big Oonga Boonga damage on that slash. That is like the level of strategy that you have, or you could like decide to consume 1 stack of Snowforge Blade on your first rotation and then have 2 available on your second one. You can kind of see what's going on over here. You're going to have to make a game time decision depending on what type of content you're facing against, how many enemies you're facing against, blah, blah, blah. Is there like a second boss after this, or do you just really need to like go? Or does the boss have like an invulnerability phase or something like that you're trying to like unload damage into? You kind of got to actually think about when you're going to be using these stacks, and I think that's very cool. I think that's very actually awesome that they decided to add this layer of depth and complexity to the character while still making it a very easy input. It's kind of more like a strategic input versus like a mechanical input, and I do think that's pretty neat. And naturally, you're seeing over here, basically, you gotta wait 4 seconds before combat starts, kind of like Augusta, and then you'll get that one free stack of Snowforge Blade before you enter your first rotation. So that's just something to think about. You're probably going to want to make sure you're not rushing when your endgame clears start. Now, a little bit more detail about our Forte circuit, Everfrost Dominion. This is the Glacial Bite component, which remember is a bit of a replacement for Glacial Chafe. While Hiyuki's in the team, Glacial Chafe inflicted by nearby resonators in the team is converted to Glacial Bite. Every time a new stack of Glacial Bite is inflicted, an instance of Glacial Bite is triggered based on that enemy's current Glacial Bite stack limit. So remember what we looked at over here with the 2 stacks of Snow Rest? The more Glacial Bite stacks somebody has, the more this 102% is doing. You kind of understand what's happening, right? That's where like Chisa and her increasing the stack limit up to 13, that's where it becomes very, very, very handy. Glacial Bite can be inflicted on frozen targets, and Glacial Bite is considered Glacial Chafe, and Glacial Bite damage is considered Glacial Chafe damage. So that's where the interaction with their signature and of course all that other stuff is coming in. When claiming Inward Vision or Basic Attack EI hits a target, if the target has no fewer than 10 stacks, consume 10 stacks and trigger Frostbind once. I do almost like wonder if like this can result in a DPS loss if you like trigger these at the wrong time, because or maybe it just doesn't matter and you're just free to trigger them, because part of me almost thinks that I don't want to consume the stacks and just have like more and more of like the 10 to 13 stack Glacial Bites hitting the enemy. This is like a little bit interesting, and I'm not sure how it's actually going to play out in combat. And when Hiyuki joins the team, removes all stacks of Glacial Chafe from the targets. And when Hiyuki leaves the team, if there is no other resonator in the team who can convert Glacial Chafe into Glacial Bite, all their stacks are... Yeah, this is like some fucking goofy-ass overworld shit. I don't see this ever actually doing anything. So, Present Self is how she starts out, and she just restores dedication. You want to get to 300 dedication, which is very easy to do. Use her heavy attack, and then use her ultimate, which will give her the ability to turn it to the Forclaim Self. And, well... That's just with the first cast of her Liberation. And while in Forclaim Self, Hiyuki unlocks a new form and restores Frostheart when she uses her skill and when she uses her basic attacks. So, if Hiyuki has at least 100 points of Frostheart, that's how she enters EI stance. And performing any of the following actions basically cause her to either flash backwards or flash into the enemy and enter EI stance. Basically, pressing a dodge after using any normal attack, or, oh yeah, pressing a dodge after using a normal attack causes her to enter it, or holding a resonance skill within a certain period after using any of her resonance skills. So naturally, right, you're going to want to use a certain number of attacks in the Foreclaim Self form to fully fill out and get 300 points of Frost Heart. And then you're going to either press a dodge after using an attack or hold down the resonance skill after using a skill, and then you'll enter EI stance. And you probably want to have 300 points of Frost Heart because using an EI stance attack requires you to spend 100. And you have a 300 cap over here. And so if there's a valid target and then you also have like the W input, the forward input held down, Hiyuki is instead going to flash behind the enemy and then enter EI stance. You can also, which is really odd, enter EI stance while airborne. And so you can use those EI attacks in the air, which is going to be pretty badass. That's probably what you're going to do after using your resonance skill in the air. You can decide to do a little bit of goofy aerial stuff. And upon entering EI stance, her mid-air dodge charges a reset, and EI stance ends if Hiyuki switched out. So you can't really do any of that. You can't really do any crazy quick swap stuff while you're in the middle of EI stance. Just keep that in mind. Now, basic attack EI. And this is where you'll see the resource consumptions and the resource generated. So within a certain period after entering the stance, press a normal attack and consume 100 points of Frost Heart to use the Yai basic attack, dealing glacial damage, which is considered liberation damage. Makes sense. If Frost Heart remains at 100 points or above after casting the skill, press the normal attack within a certain period of time to simply use the Yai basic again. And if Yuki is attacked by an enemy within a certain period after using it, neutralize the instance of damage. Wow. Big words. Neutralize this instant of damage, basically make it 0, and become immune to interruptions while reducing all incoming damage by 100%. Yeah, she basically has like invulnerability mode while she's doing these attacks. You can imagine that these attacks aren't really going to take that long to do because it would be kind of absurd for her to be invulnerable for this long. But yeah, that's a mechanic that's built into her kit. So each time basic attack Yai is cast, if Yuki has Frost-Hearted Yai, she gets 3 stacks of this when using her first liberation, the one that transforms her. Consume 1 stack of Frost-Hardened, 2, inflict 3 stacks of Glacio Chafe, and then gain 1 stack of White Out Bitter Frost. And remember, to do her special heavy attack, right, where she creates the gigantic ice sculpture, you get like the cinematic zoom in, and then she like, you know, blows it up by sheathing her sword again. You need 3 stacks of White Out Bitter Frost. So that's how you get the 3 stacks over here. It's from doing 3 Yai attacks, which require 100 points of Frost Heart each. So you got to get the 300 points of Frost Heart, enter Yai stance, consume all of your Frost Heart and stuff, and then get the 3 stacks of Whiteout Bitter Frost, use the heavy attack, and then get your Snowforge Blade. Do you understand? Her kit is not that hard to understand. But bro, she has like 17 million resources, but they all just kind of like flow into each other. It's not that complicated once you kind of get the sequence understood. So dedication. This is her initial Forte circuit. It's goofy. While in Present Self, casting basic attack Present Self stage 3 restores 100 points. Her intro gives her 200. She has a cap of 300. Her intro skill advances her to the 3rd stage of her basic attack. So basically, you intro skill, basic attack again, and you'll have 300 points of dedication. Then you just heavy attack and then use your liberation. It's very, very, very simple. Her resonance skill, baseline one, you don't really ever use it because all it's going to do is just make your... Her resonance skill restores 100 dedication, and then her basic attack stage 3 that will follow will restore 200. So it's kind of like, it's another way to gain access to the heavy attack, but if you're using an intro skill, it's pointless. However, this is a way for her in quick swap to gain access to her liberation without using an intro skill, so that kind of like bonus is in there if that's one way that you want to get your 300 dedication, right? Maybe you want to get into her liberation state without using an intro. And this is one way that you can do it. It's relatively seamless and pretty fast too. Frost Heart. Hiyuki holds up to 300 points of Frost Heart, and Frost Heart is restored while using, basically, her resonance skills in the enhanced state or when any of her normal attacks in the enhanced state other than her special heavy attack well, they hit the target. So you can probably see over here, there's going to be like an optimal attack chain that you probably do. Probably like a skill into like some basic attacks, and then you'll have 300 points of Frost Heart. Then you'll like activate Yai stance and then do all your shit. Frost Heart and Yai, the other resource. This has a maximum of 3 points in casting for claiming Inward Vision. The first cast of her liberation that transforms her gives her 3 points of it. And then Whiteout Bitter Frost. Each time Frost Hearted Yai is consumed through doing Yai attacks, which cost 100 Frost Heart each, gain 1 point of Whiteout Bitter Frost. And then Snowforge Blade. That stacks up to 3 times. And every time heavy attack Frost Splinter, 4 claim self is cast, gain 1 stack of Snowforge Blade. How do you use this attack? Well, you need 3 stacks of Whiteout Bitterfrost. And remember, that's the cinematic one that creates the sculpture that she does the little thing and it blows up. Do you guys understand what's going on over here? Not actually that complicated when you understand the flow of resources. And I will say, the one good thing that Kuro did over here is that they showed the flow of resources pretty well, right? You need your 300 points of dedication to be able to, well, enter the form that you can generate Frostheart with, and then you generate Frostheart in her second form, get 300 points of it so that you can then fully consume all of your Frost-hardened Yai stacks. And then as you consume the Frost-hardened Yai stacks, you'll gain 1 stack of Whiteout Bitterfrost for each one that you consume. You consume all 3, then you can use your special heavy attack, which then gives you a stack of Snowforge Blade. And I think this is a typo over here. It should be saying Bitterfrost. And just so we're all fully aware of what that attack looks like, it's this one. So you gotta do your 3 Yai attacks, consume the Frost Hardened shit, gain the Whiteout Bitterfrost stacks, and then do this special heavy, which is gonna give you that Snowforge Blade stack, which makes her second cast of her Liberation deal more damage. And you can choose how much you want to charge it up. There we go. Not too crazy. Not too crazy at all. Now, though, that's just the resources. Now let's read a bit more of a detailed kit breakdown over her Liberation. So, heavy attack for claiming Inward Vision becomes available after casting. Wait, I feel like these are just fucking typos. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, these just look like typos over here. I don't even know why this line is even here. So while in present self, press Resonance Liberation to cast the skill. You have to be able to use her bow heavy attack, right? Which is done by consuming 300 dedication. So upon casting the skill, gain 3 points of Frost Hardened Yai. We all are aware of that. You consume those to gain the Whiteout Bitterfrost stacks. Remove 300 points of dedication and Frost Hiyuki. Frostheart. This is a fucking disaster. Then enter 4 claim self, her purple form, and restore 50 points of Frostheart. So her first Liberation cast automatically clears her number of Frostheart stacks and then gives her 50 after they're all cleared. So you kind of only need to gain 250 points to gain the full 300 that you need to do all of your Yai attacks. This ability is also going to apply 4 stacks of Glacio Chafe, or really Glacio Bite. And casting this initial one does not consume Resonance energy. Now, the second cast. While in 4 claim self, the purple form, this Liberation can be cast via the following ways. You just press the Liberation button and release it, and you'll cast 4 claiming Blade Liberation. That's the one where she just slashes everything. And if Hiyuki has 3 full points of Snowforge Blade, she's going to consume all of them and then make it deal the most damage possible. However, the quick tap one, if you don't have 3 points, you won't consume any. However, you can also hold the Liberation to enter a charging state, and during this state, consume 1 point of Snowforge Blade periodically, and release the Resonance Liberation to cast the ability. And if no Snowforge Blade is consumed when the Liberation is cast, Hiyuki will continue to charge the attack and cast the skill automatically after a certain period of time. You probably just don't ever want to use the charge version unless you're actually going to consume some stacks. Otherwise, you're just sitting there not fucking doing anything. So it might be better to just like do a quick cast and release if you're not intending on consuming any stacks at all, and that might actually be the fastest way to get all of her damage out. This ability will also be cast automatically when Snowforge Blade depletes. Hiyuki deals glacial damage, and each point of Snowforge Blade that you use is going to make the damage multiplier of the attack increase. And this is where I'm not entirely sure whether or not she's going to use energy on the second cast. It says over here, casting 4 claiming Inward Vision does not consume Resonance energy. I'm not sure if I see that here, right? So that's why I'm saying I think the second cast might actually consume energy because it's not clear. It doesn't say that this one is free. So she might still need ER. Do keep that in mind. That's why I'm saying we gotta wait until she actually releases to figure out whether this second cast consumes energy. Because if it doesn't have this line over here, I'm assuming that it does. So we'll just have to see. And remember, this ability, when you use it, is just going to clear all of your stuff, all of your resources, including the dedication and the Frostheart. But you will keep the Snowforge Blade stacks unless you do consume them, and you probably will keep your other stacks as well, like the EI stacks, as well as the... I mean, it'd be weird if you had Whiteout Bitter Frost stacks still, but yeah, that might be something that you keep as well. Now, a little bit of extra info on her regular basic attacks. So, basic attack, this is just like her baseline one. Like I said before, you're almost never gonna actually use it. But do keep in mind that the third stage of her basic, which you do use every rotation at least one time, it's gonna apply 1 stack of Glacio Chafe. And that third hit also gives you 100 points of dedication. That's just something to keep in mind. And then her special heavy attack over here, when dedication reaches 300 points, she gets the Frost Splinter attack, which shoots the 3 arrows, right? That basically just allows her to, apply a stack of Glacio Chafe on hit. I think it's actually 3 stacks because each arrow applies 1. And then she's also going to be able to use her Liberation afterwards. I think we all understood that. She's also going to have a regular plunge attack. And then she's also going to have a nice little dodge counter that advances her to the 3rd stage. I don't think you're ever going to actually use Hiyuki's dodge counter under any fucking circumstance. It sounds like you're griefing, because if you're using the baseline one, that means you're not in the enhanced state. Now it's time for us to move on to her enhanced state basic attacks. So essentially, this one is going to be a 5-hit attack chain, which is clearly a lot more than the 3 that she has in her normal form. And stages 3, 4, and 5 all apply 1 stack of Glacio Chafe on hit. So you guys do remember how that inherent skill works, right? When she's at 2 stacks, every time she applies Glacio Chafe, she basically applies Glacio Chafe again. A burst of damage from it again. And so this basic attack chain over here, it says it applies 3 stacks. It's low-key actually closer to like 6 if you have Chisa on the team. And so you can kind of see, right, when you combine this massive amount of stack application over here, right, to this bonus that you see on the inherent skill, where when Hiyuki's the active resonator, each time she applies Glacio Chafe, she additionally deals 102% Glacio Bite damage once. Well, you're seeing, right, that basic attack chain goes from 3 applications to 6. That could be a lot of damage once you think about it, right? So that's just something to keep in mind over there when it comes to this attack chain over here in the 4-claim self-state. Now, the heavy attack. This is one where she's able to, like, block a certain number of attacks. I don't think you're ever going to use this shit. I think you're only going to use this when you're, like, aura farming. Basically, she has, like, a hold breath state where she continually consumes stamina, deals liberation damage, and it also allows her to, like, advance to other parts of her attack chain. This is mainly used to parry damage from the enemy, so it's more likely that this is going to be used in, like, hologram content and stuff like that. It might actually be used as well as a way to, like, shorten her attack chain to get into some of, like, stages 3, 4, and 5, because if you do end up hitting the counter, well, guess what? You'll be able to chain into basic attack, well, 4 and 5. Right afterwards. So, yeah, this seems like a pretty, like, active parry, which I think a lot of people will have a lot of fun with, especially in certain bits of more challenging content. But do keep in mind that it is going to consume a lot of stamina at the same time. So this maybe is something that you're going to have to be a little careful with. Then you're going to have the unique heavy attack when Whiteout Bitter Frost is full. And remember, to be able to use that, you need to consume all of your Frost Hardened Yais, which you can only do when your Frost Heart is full. So when Whiteout Bitter Frost is full after doing all those attacks, you get the special cinematic move. It's going to give you 1 point of Snowforge Blade, which lets your ultimate do more damage, and then you're going to consume 3 stacks of it to activate. This is also going to do simply just, well, 1 stack of Glacio Chafe Infliction, which is not really that much once you think about it, considering how much work you need to do to build this up. And if she's airborne while using it, she'll land on the ground first. So do keep in mind that this ability can be started casting while you're in the air. So that's pretty cool. And she's also going to have a special mid-air attack as well. So she's able to basically attack while in the air, and she's got a full-ass attack chain. And you can see it's up to 3 consecutive attacks. They all deal liberation damage, and stage 3 is a plunging attack. And stages 2 and 3, while she's in the air, they apply 1 stack of Glacio Chafe on hit, and then the mid-air attack chain will not be reset by casting skills other than like entering Yai mode. So you can actually do like some mid-air attacks, use her resonance skill while like in the air, and then continue the mid-air attack chain, which is pretty goddamn neat once you think about it. She'll be able to do some of like the most varied combos, I think, on field out of pretty much any character in the game. There's likely going to be an optimal one for like the most DPS possible, but do keep in mind that, well, it really depends on what the enemy's doing, because, well, if they are flying around a lot and they're being annoying as shit, just imagine you're like fighting Hivati or something, then you're probably going to want to make use of these aerial maneuvers that are available here. Now, her dodge counter in Giga form in the enhanced state. So this one basically is deal Resonance Liberation damage on dodge counter, and then advance your basic attack to stage 3. This looks like something that you're actively going to want to use, so keep in mind that this will advance your attack chain very, very, very well, and stages 3, 4, and 5, you want to use those, because those apply Glacio Chafe on every single hit. So yeah. Blue Hiyuki, purple Hiyuki's dodge counter seems like it's pretty solid. And now we just have some basic Tune Break stuff. And think about it this way. Tune Breaks are going to be good for one thing in Hiyuki's kit, and that's just to advance her. Otherwise, she has no real interaction with Tune. No Tune Rupture, no Tune Strain. But after using a Tune Break, she basically advances to the 3rd stage of her basic attack chain in both forms. And so remember how I just talked about how using her dodge counter is good to advance her attack chain? A Tune Break will basically do the same thing and allow her to access, in purple mode, attacks 3, 4, and 5, and in regular red form, right, it'll let her get her 100 dedication immediately. But like, you already have so many different ways to do that. It's really only a factor in the enhanced state. So yeah, that is the Hiyuki kit, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm looking at the runtime of this video over here, and it's close to a goddamn hour. But that makes sense, especially considering how many goddamn resources are in this character's kit. And at a baseline, this is my kind of like main summary when it comes to her. She's clearly meant to have a lot of interactions with Glacio Chafe, negative status application, and stuff like that. However, unless her multipliers are like literally some straight up doo-doo water, she should be able to function very well with a solid cast of baseline supports like Lene, Mornier, potentially even Shorekeeper, so on and so forth, because she still has that 40% critical damage buff simply from her existing on her inherent. However, I see that her ceiling, just when it comes to damage as a whole, is going to be fueled by Chisa, simply due to the fact that she applies a lot of Glacio Chafe in her kit. Like a fuck ton of Glacio Chafe in her kit. And when that second part of her inherent basically gives you an additional like pop of Glacio Bite damage every single time Chafe is inflicted, well, think about it this way, ladies and gentlemen, that's a lot of additional Glacio Bite damage, and having a character in the team, right, that will make it deal more damage by increasing the stack limit count by 3, well, that's probably going to be something that you want for sustainability in the future. And so that's kind of like what my take is right now. Hiyuki should function very well. She should function pretty admirably even without a Chisa, but you will be looking to pick her up if you want to reach Hiyuki's ceiling. However, this is also a good question to ask. Will Hiyuki's ceiling be required to clear all the content in the game? And that's probably a no, right? You probably won't need that to clear all the content in the game. So it's kind of like a matter of, hey, do I want to give Hiyuki her best team possible? Then yes, get ready to pull Chisa, and of course, get ready to pull the Glacio Chafe sub DPS that's coming out soon. Or I would hope they're coming out soon. But if not, you're just looking for a cool unit that can clear and you don't want to spend too much, and you already have Lene and Mornier, then that's something that you could probably do. Because you can also think about it this way. Your Lene and Mornier, right, might be on a bit of a vacation because maybe you have Denya and Amith ready to go, but that would involve you pulling Chisa anyways. You can kind of already see how Chisa's already meant to have quite a bit of value moving forward. Yeah, because Chisa's also going to be sort of mandatory for Denya coming out in the second half. So, yeah. Good thing Kuro's giving out like 150 pulls in this version, because it looks like you're going to have a lot of different places to spend them. And if you have been a Chisa owner, a faithful Chisa owner through trying times, as she released in version 2.8, and she's been the biggest piece of dog shit for a long time, her stocks have finally, well, they've arrived, ladies and gentlemen. They're actually worth something now. And it's very clear after reading the kits of Hiyuki, and of course, just knowing how Amith Fusion Burst is like unplayable without Chisa, and is actually still bad, probably without Denya, well, it's kind of clear over here what this unit is doing to change up the meta in those regards. And, well, looks like it's time to get pulling if you don't have her yet. But is she mandatory? No, I don't really think so. Not for Hiyuki, at least. And it'll definitely be a good test for us on her release, just to see how she functions in some more budget teams overall. But yeah, that's going to be the kit overview. Like I said before, a lot of words, a lot of resources in here. But once you do figure out how her kit generally functions, not really that complicated at all, especially knowing how all those different resources just flow into each other. That'll be it for this one. Let me know what you all thought. Peace out.